Hello, everyone, and welcome to our INSEAD Tech Talk today. I'm Sandra El Dakkak, and I run INSEAD's Tech Talk in the Case webinar series as part of the research and innovation team at INSEAD. I'm very happy to welcome you to today's webinar as part of the Tech Talk X series by Digital at INSEAD. And we're dedicated to exploring new technologies, their applications, as well as their impact on management, business, and society. For more information, please visit the Digital at INSEAD website, as well as INSEAD AI focus pages. We'll share some links. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to today's panelist. We have Benedetto Conversano, who is an experienced business executive with a strong background in digital transformation and technology strategy. He has worked across blue chip organizations and multicultural environments, and he's currently writing the Braveheart CIO, a guide for leaders navigating AI era transformation, arguing that courage more than technology drives successful change. I'm also very happy to introduce you to Benjamin Haddad, who is a tech strategist working at the intersection of capital markets, cyber, and emerging technologies. He advises CXOs and private equity firms on mission-critical decisions, from acquisition strategy to product acceleration and frontier tech investment. Ville Satopää is an associate professor of technology and operations management at INSEAD, specializing in collective intelligence in forecasting and decision making. He teaches data analysis and forecasting to our MBA and other students, and co-created the very successful online program Transform Your Business with AI with fellow faculty. Thank you again, all of you, for agreeing to be part of our discussion. And over to you, Ville, for a brief intro into today's session.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandra, for that wonderful introduction. Yeah, let me just briefly set the stage for what we are about to talk about today. Now, over the past few years, we've seen AI really move from experimentation to something far more disruptive than that. It really is forcing organizations to rethink how work is done, who's making these decisions, and what capabilities leaders need to build. But then again, despite the unprecedented technological progress that we're seeing, we also see most companies stuck somewhere between these impressive pilots and a very limited business impact. So, in my experience, sort of from my vantage point, I get to teach and work with a lot of executives. I teach forecasting and decision making, as you were saying. Also been observing AI adoption across various industries. I think the central challenge is really no longer the algorithms. Instead, it really is the operating system of the organizations. Now, this includes fragmented workflows, unclear decision rights, low data readiness, and also human fears and identity questions that really surface the moment AI enters the room with us. Now, that's exactly what I want to explore today. I don't really want to focus so much on what AI can do. I think we already know that. Instead, what I want to talk about is why adoption stalls, right? How our work must evolve and which human skills rise in importance as AI becomes a coworker rather than a distant system. Now, with all that being said, I'm super excited. I'm looking forward to this conversation with Benedetto and Benjamin, who bring very deep practical experience from technology strategy, transformation, and really from the front lines of AI implementation. Sandra, back to you.
Thank you, Ville. So let's dive right in. And starting with the core challenge you already raised, Benedetto, from your experience scaling AI, what is the one organizational misconception that hinders adoption in companies?
Thank you for the question, Sandra, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching this tech talk. So I will start with a concrete experience I had in a conversation with an executive to whom I asked her point of view about using AI in her daily life. And the answer I got, which is not dissimilar from many I got, was like, well, I don't need to use AI because I don't need someone to write email for me. And that answer impersonates the misconception that AI is there to replace human being and to create efficiency. And it's a misconception that I think overall we are hearing because the push for AI, we believe, can be generated by the attractiveness of reducing cost and increase profit for organization, which ends up being interpreted like replacing human being. This is, I think, the key misconception. Where AI is really adding value is in effectiveness of redesigning business processes and effectiveness in decision making that can bring the result of the processes to a completely different level. A very quick example I want to bring. We are all using Zoom at this moment. And a very common functionality that is known about Zoom is the AI assistant that creates a summary. That's very good. But a much more powerful functionality of Zoom that is much less known is the ability to get a coach. You can have a Zoom coach that can diagram the way people are interacting in a meeting and enable teams to be much more effective in the way that they handle the time. And that's the key difference between efficiency and effectiveness.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Benedetto. Benjamin, if we build on this, where do you see companies lose momentum between proof of concept and real value creation? Is it tech culture or something else entirely? Benjamin, you're still on mute. Thank you.
Here you go. You hear me? Thanks for
Yes,
the
we
question,
can.
Sandra. It's nice to meet you, everybody. And so yeah, if you look at maybe the more complex types of companies, right? To your question, where do you lose momentum between proof of concept and real value? In the large enterprise reality, the stall really happens not with the technology that is not ready in AI, not with the governance. It's the minute you touch the real IT mess of a typical very large enterprise, right? An architecture that's made of hundreds, if not thousands of applications, of types of data, of very different types of infrastructures in multiple locations, etc. All of this extremely complex architecture, which is messy for any given workflow of an enterprise worker in an HR department made of hundreds of colleagues, if not thousands, or an IT department, you name it. Any of those workflows has multiple applications. Some of them have unpatched vulnerabilities, other types of risks, and sometimes just very old, clunky 20 years old legacy systems that still run the operation, the workflow. And that's really, I think, where the stall happens. We do a ton of proof of concepts with very innovative AI players that in a proof of concept demonstrate the art of the possible and excite everybody. It is extremely easy to get stimulated by how this or that innovative technology player can change the game in a workflow, make things more effective, make things more efficient. But the moment, the whole gig is really mitigating the sort of great virtual results that you have in a lab controlled environment and bridge that with the production complexity, which is typically immense in large corporates and enterprises across industries. I'm just out now of one of those examples with an Israeli startup, right? Shipping AI agents in 6 weeks for multiple workflows which was an outstanding result for this large Fortune 500 CIO. And the failure was in the phase after the art of the possible, after the proof of concept was successfully passed around integration planning. How is it then going to work with all the different APIs you have to customize, with all the different types of data you have to integrate, with all the types of regulation you have to put up with, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not really a tech failure per se, it's more an operating system, right? The large enterprise is almost like your operating system, extremely complex. And it's that bridge, I think, that you have to redesign the workflow before you try to integrate or install intelligence. When you do this, you improve the decision rights, you improve the risk management, you improve the data routing, and you see real compression of decision cycles and results, improving without adding headcount necessarily. And so you can't skip, this is the bottom line, I guess, right? You can't skip this sort of architectural redesign. You're not going to scale anything in an enterprise with AI if you're not thinking about architecture from the get-go.
Thank you, Benjamin. I think this is maybe a good point to shift to why is it so difficult to implement AI, from why it's so difficult to how the work then needs to change, because I understand it's not actually the technical difficulties that companies are facing. It's more about how we can get ourselves to work with AI and how this needs to evolve. Ville, in your knowledge article, AI transformation is not about tech. You mentioned that AI forces organizations to clarify who decides what and how work actually gets done. Why is this so hard for us to do?
Well, yeah, in this interesting piece that I had the pleasure of writing with Benedetto, we were really exploring how to bring everybody on board, how to get them to adopt AI and look for different ways to use it. Now, to dig into that a little bit, I think first thing we need to recognize is that the kind of AI we talk about today is really very general. It really is this type of a general purpose technology. It's a little bit like electricity, right? It can touch so many different tasks and roles and decisions in our organizations. So what does this mean for leaders is that maybe they don't want to go about it anymore in sort of a clear top-down direction on so they want to set the direction on how the organization wants to use AI, but maybe sort of instead of forcing enrolling it over everybody, you want to invite the individuals on this sort of a journey of rediscovering the future together, right? So instead of dictating all the details, we really want to bring them along onto this process of innovation and reimagining all their future roles. Now, that could be difficult for various reasons. In particular, there could be triggers for fear. Fear could come from the fact that people are worried about this taking over a big portion of their job. It could also come from the fear of not really understanding the technology well enough to really see where the opportunities are. And this really brings me back to the importance of education again, right? We need to educate people, and we also need to manage this fear, which I think is very central to this kind of AI transformation.
Thank you. Thank you, Ville. And if AI triggers this kind of change and even fear, Benedetto, where should leaders in companies, where should they begin? I mean, taking the hand of the employees, I see that, but what is your experience? Where do you think should they begin? Because it seems to me also it's a bit the same than we already discussed 7, 8, 10 years ago when we discussed digital transformation and everyone was scared. So what is your experience? Because I assume you have seen this.
Yes, and you're right. It's very important to look backwards and understand the learning of the history. I see a strong correlation between this moment in the history with what happened actually at the beginning of the millennium, when the dot-com appeared. And it took a while for organization to understand that the real value of the dot-com was about reinventing the way product and services were designed, reinventing the way to connect with with consumers, with suppliers, and have much more personalized experience. And that's how complete industry have been reinvented. Like think about music, think about travel, think about books, and so on. Therefore, my advice is we should take the learning and start from the business strategy, from the business model, and rethink how can the organization now leverage the opportunity of the new technology available, and rethink the way we design products, services, go to market, and so on. And this is, I would say, not happening at the right speed, because the approach usually of leaders is go to the organization and say, hey, there is this great piece of technology here, think what you can do with that, and hence the multitude of pilots that, for the reason we have been talking about, are not very successful, at least at the scale that we wish. That's the reason. So my advice is A, start from the top with a top-down approach, reinventing the business strategy, and B, and this is for me the key thing, is use AI to redesign your business strategy. And there are ways to do that. Create the right context. I don't want to become too technical, so that basically you have the unique insight into your business that can open up a completely new way of redesigning your operating model, business strategy, and the go-to-market and product and services.
Thank you, Benedetto. If I may just put in a small side question that just came from the audience already. There was a comment on, are you really sure the workforce is afraid of AI? Because the anonymous attendee is not really seeing that. Could you give a small comment on that from your experience, or maybe, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, the talk in the village is the headlines of the newspaper. That's what they continue to report, right? Okay. I don't want to mention companies, but the fact that we hear every day, we read every day, this company is going to reduce X thousands number of employees because of AI, is the music. Then, okay. Now, of course, I expect in organization where I've been operating in different shape, that there can be definitely leaders that reverse the trend, and they say, okay, fine, this is what we read, but this is what we're gonna do in our company. I don't deny that.
Okay, thank you,
Sandra. Can I add to that a little bit?
Thank you,
because
Ville. Sure.
One example that I have on this, where I sort of was on the front lines experiencing the fear in the room, is as I mentioned earlier, I get to teach executives from various companies. And sometimes we do this little exercise where we actually tear apart our own profession to the subtasks. And then we start analyzing the subtasks and to what extent they can be automated or augmented by AI. And that day, I think I had a room full of accountants, and we decided to do it for them, right? We did this as a demo in front of the room, and the results were quite shocking to them. Most of their job seemingly can be automated by AI. That was the result. And I could really sense the temperature in the room dropping. And then what happened was that actually that day when I was teaching, the sort of head of AI of this company was sitting in the room following my lecture. His role was to step in on the last hour of the day to then put everything we talk about into their context. And he said that actually this is a great exercise we have already mapped out in our entire organization like this, right? So kind of just, not to say throw more fuel into the fire, but the opposite of that. So the temperature dropped even more after that, right? So I could sense the fear. I could tell that people were surprised. They were shocked by the results.
Mm.
Now, to kind of wrap up this story on a positive note, what happened at the end when it was this head of AI's person to turn to come in? What he said in the end, which made the temperature come back to sort of regular levels, was that he said, "Look, we need to grow as a company very at a certain rate. We cannot really grow at this rate by hiring more people. You need to become more efficient. You need to become more productive. Here is a tool for you to augment yourself. Learn how to use it, right?" And I think that's when the tension was released, right? And I could really
Okay.
sense that we were comfortable again. Okay, I just want to add that one example since I've seen it.
Great. Thank you, Ville. Thank you for sharing. Benjamin, you've also seen decision making up close. And the question is, where do you see the biggest mismatch between how leaders think decisions are made and how they're actually made? And how actually does that affect the AI adoption in companies?
Yeah, I think that there's two ways of answering your questions. One is at the strategy level, and one is more at the organizational level. How does decision flow through an organization? The strategy point, I think that's sometimes underestimated is that wrapping an LLM around a type of workflow to facilitate a decision in an enterprise. Take the accounting example, but there are, of course, hundreds of thousands of different use cases. Wrapping an LLM is not the challenge. Everybody can do it. It's actually quite easy. The challenge to build really an defensible AI-powered business is how do you use the exclusive data that you have to optimize this AI layer that you're going to wrap the workflow with, right? If you're a freight forwarder, you have exclusive data on logistics, and the challenge is unlocking that data, making sure that it informs an LLM to give you the best, most relevant answer that may come from sometimes uncodified knowledge as well. That's at the strategy level, fundamentally, what we're seeing as a key challenge. At the organizational level, I think it is, still often the case that some are in fantasy land thinking that, the decision follows an org chart, a very clean hierarchy of decisions, when the reality is much more mundane and obvious, I guess, to many people here that are mature to the realities of a large enterprise. They flow. The decisions will travel from a WhatsApp exchange, a shadow committee, a sort of quick chat around the coffee machine, and people who try to unplug the threat of AI by designing very complex org charts for decision and complex policies that nobody uses, unfortunately get stuck, right? So sometimes this is even made more complicated by flat organizations where it's hard to know where is the decision really going or over matrix organizations. So I've seen this, for example. I'll give you a European banking example where, in the middle of due diligence that included a proof of concept for this AI solution, there was an aligned decision governance model that was there to help essentially formalize the approval chains. And in parallel, three guys in a room were trying to build their own informal approach to how to sort of deploy the AI tool. The more formal approach followed, and the follow-on project just evaporated. Too complex, not working, and it's just insane how we make things complex sometimes by over-designing, over-engineering processes that don't necessarily need to exist. And so I think this is a simplification opportunity that is massive. We have AI very often that doesn't fail at the organizational level if we, back to my very first point, if we rethink the architecture and the org flow in a simpler way.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Benjamin. A very good picture of real workflow versus the formal one, I think. I'm just going to encourage the audience to continue to put questions in, and you can also vote the questions up, so it's a bit easier for us to see what you would like to answer. Maybe before we move to the human side of this transformation, there have been a couple of questions around the environment, the legal and ethical practices. So I don't know, maybe that would be something we can comment on before we move to the human skills. Any volunteers?
On
So how
the ethical side, I'm happy to take this one because I think it also has a very strong connection to the human component, right? Because when I do think about, and this comes up also in when I teach sometimes responsible AI and AI governance from that lens, is that there are certain problems that are technical and certain problems that are not necessarily technical, and that's when the human needs to step in. Often when we talk about AI, there are metrics, sort of KPIs or performance metrics that we use to measure how good it is. And that often tends to revolve around accuracy. Can it make accurate predictions? Can it make accurate decisions and so forth, right? But there's a whole other world out there, when we start talking about explainability, for instance. Can we explain these kind of systems, right? Privacy, right? We need a lot of data, but are we at the same time respecting every individual's right to privacy, right? We also need to talk about fairness, right? If these automated systems are used as a plug into decision making that touches upon human lives, right, of various groups, are we being fair to different groups, right? And so forth, right? Now, this sort of sets the landscape, in sort of ethics of AI and responsible AI, right? There's a lot of these different dimensions. And the complicated bit is that we wish we could have it all. I wish I could have a private, fair, transparent, accurate algorithm. But often the reality is that you cannot have it all. Like there's a lot of clear, simple trade-offs on how you need to forego some accuracy to gain more privacy or forego some accuracy to gain more fairness and so forth, right? Now, where do you want to be in this sort of spectrum, right? Of this sort of a multidimensional performance space, right? That's typically for the humans to decide. We need sort of AI and tech tells you what's possible, and then the humans need to come into play in this step in to govern and tell what we should do, right? So that's my few
I
cents on
agree.
that. I guess that connects to the human piece a little bit.
And
I
I
agree
think
with Villa.
that, sorry, Benjamin, go
Just
ahead.
to add a point, I totally agree with Ville's. The ideology that we're putting in AI today is massive. It really shapes how the systems behave. You guys may remember about a year and something ago, there was a moment where Google's Gemini model produced a picture of George Washington that's black guy, colored skin, and the famous moment in the Google stock history. You could see it drop. Some people were buying the dip as well, but there was essentially, I think, a change in the approach by the leadership of Google, where they realized that the people in control of those AI ethics team can't be too ideologically brainwashed. They can't insert this sort of, oh my God, if somebody says it's not okay that George Washington wasn't black, if I tell the model that I want George Washington to be a black guy, he has to produce this, otherwise it's racism, right? There was this type of moment where I think Google completely flipped, and this is well-documented stuff, completely moved along the continuum that Ville was described, from a pretty extremely controlled and strict approach to the definition of good and bad, replaced the entire team, and today is much more loose with things. And you can see the results as well in the quality of their model being rolled out, right? It's the key point, I think, is that ethics isn't a feature. It's really, we are today with those models encoding ideology. I can give you other examples, of course, with DeepSeek. Try and ask DeepSeek, what happened in Tiananmen, and you'll have some fun. But the values that you choose to scale as an enterprise in those AI model is fundamentally linked to AI ethics, and that continuum is absolutely the key vector to define the quality, also the performance of your LLMs.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this, Benjamin. And I think this is a great next question then. Benedetto, did you?
Yeah, sorry, but I have a lot of sympathy for one of the questions. So I really apologize. I interrupted you. The participant that talks about the dilemma about joining AI trend versus regulation change versus waiting for regulation maturity. I have a lot of sympathy and for this question, and I understand the dilemma, and I wanted to offer a perspective. I don't think things are going to get better in terms of stability. I think speed is going to increase. This is the environment we live in. The speed at which technology is going to change is going, I think, to exponentially increase, because the good technology, the better technology that we have today, I use the word better as in more powerful, is going to create more powerful technology. So we are really in this type of environment. Everything I have seen developing in technology in the last 30 years just got faster. And therefore, for me, it's like we need to learn to live in this state of, let's say, high speed that is created uncertainty. And waiting for things to stabilize is not going to be the solution. It's just going to leave us back. So
thank you, Benedetto. Yes, and thank you, Samuel, for putting this question. So when we know this, Benedetto, which of our human capabilities rise in importance, especially in leaders, and why?
Yeah, this was not designed, but now even more important, I think, I talk about courage, really. So let me articulate why I say that courage in human being is going to be even more important. I mean, in order to have courage, you need to have a purpose. You are brave because you believe in your purpose, and therefore you lean forward in taking actions that otherwise you wouldn't take. And so far there is no purpose in AI. So far, I don't know. I can't say what's gonna happen in the next year. It's too difficult to predict, but so far there is no purpose. So human beings have purpose, and therefore I think we need to be more brave in pursuing the purpose of doing the right things. That's my belief, and that's what I talk in the book. That's why the book is called The Braveheart CIO. I think we need to be more bold in making a decision towards doing the right thing. I will make one example. Rightly so, Benjamin has been talking about the challenge of scaling up AI pilots because of the complexity of the technology landscape. That is an issue for so many organizations. That is a symptom. The complexity of the technology, let's say, is not the problem, is a symptom. Is a symptom of a lack of governance of business processes, and not having the courage to sort out that void of governance is one of the things where I think CIO needs to step in much more. And that's the type of courage. But of course, it's a difficult decision because it means having very difficult conversations inside the organization that so far we didn't have.
Thank you, Benedetto. Ville, if you look at your work from governance and also from forecasting, what would you add? What are the human capabilities that stand out for you?
Specifically related to forecasting. Yeah, it's interesting that I mean there's a lot of talk about the hybrid, right? Of how do we get the machine and the human to work very well together, and what do they each have to bring to the table, right? I mean, I think in general, whenever we're thinking about this kind of collaboration, we need to think about what each component brings to the table. Are they complementary, right? If they're not, then the net effects cannot really be expected to be positive, right? Now, first of all, machines are extremely good at crunching through huge amounts of data in high dimensions. They're very rigorous. They can be very precise in terms of crunching numbers into a summary number that could then be fed into a decision-making process. Humans, on the other hand, are very good at sort of leveraging our own training data, which I call the sort of life experience. We've seen a lot, we've experienced a lot, we understand how the world mechanics works, and that allows us to make what I would say inference from one context over another, right? So there is a different way of thinking and processing the world that could become brought together, right? Now, how do you want to make them work together? I think the typical way to do this is to have an AI-assisted system where an AI makes a recommendation, and that goes through then validation by the human. So a human can at the end look at it and change it if they want, right? Now, there's a couple of things to be said about making these kind of things work, right? Because we'll be talking a little bit about adoption and getting people to accept these kind of AI systems. So what could go wrong? First of all, humans in this kind of setting could be rejecting the AI because they don't understand it, right? It's too much of a black box. They don't really know where these things are coming from. So that could be one reason. How could we solve that? Well, we could look at state-of-the-art techniques that allow us to sort of peek into that black box a little bit and try to explain it, right? Lots of techniques. There's a whole field called explainable AI for this. So that's one. Second thing I want to mention here, I always find it amazing how ruthless we are with the AI or with the machine, right? An AI makes a silly mistake, we like completely reject it, right? A human makes a silly mistake, we can say, oh, well, they're human after all, right? So, we need to be more forgiving, first of all. AI looks at the world very differently, and sometimes it can make mistakes that seem very silly to us. But then again, in all those other 100 cases, it probably outperformed us, right? So how do we get to see this is through experience, right? We need to interact with these systems and we need to keep track record of what was the AI prediction. Did you change it as the human at the final step? And did your change improve the final prediction, right? And as we look at this over time and we give feedback, hopefully the human comes to terms to realize that actually, yes, sometimes my adjusting could help in those silly cases when AI really got it wrong. But in the 99% of the cases, it actually probably would have been better off if I just left it on its own, right? So that's sort of a few cents around forecasting. So hybrid, I think I'm a strong believer that hybrid is the way to go. But then you have the human in the loop. So think about interpretability, explainability, keep track of performance so that you keep people and the AI on their toes, right?
Thank you, Ville. Benjamin, from your experience and the examples you've seen with companies, what human capabilities stand out for you? Sorry, Benjamin, you're on mute.
Again, speaking to myself, thanks. I think the question remains open, right? Human skills, AI makes human skills more or less important. There is a flow of studies, hypotheses that are being demonstrated to go one way or another. I won't do the whole list of recent quotes, but I think it's still to be determined, right? Which skill is really going to be more or less critical in this AI age we're entering. From what the enterprise work that we're doing, it seems that three capabilities are essentially being boosted by AI. One is the narrative compression, right? You can arrive at logical conclusions, views that would have taken a much longer time to build with a lot more people in many scenarios, in many industries. And that I think is something that's quite obvious and prevalent in for almost everybody here. This narrative compression is about AI taking the grunt work out and humans taking the consequence of it faster. So it's a narrative compression story is being measured and quantified, which is really I think interesting for what it means in terms of strategy and talent development. I think ethos of how you make decision is a second point, right? The judgment and the decision approach in this day and age of an AI-powered enterprise is different. It's much more similar to the sort of Silicon Valley, maybe Israel, and other tech ecosystem ethos of decision making. Much faster, with incomplete, imperfect data, but decide, ship first, and fix forward, right? It's just AI, I think, really amplifies that style and leaves less room for the more hierarchical, rigid, maybe decision tree that you will find in many large enterprises and complex organizations. Another one I think is related to this is this force multiplier, right? You have the ability to think in system or in network of systems much better than in the past. You have the ability when you are deploying AI in a smart way to use data and workflow and risk and incentives and architectural point all colliding together to sort of help you think systematically much better. And so that would be a third point, I think, in terms of real impact and sort of skills sort of determination, right? It's this ability to think across the system much better, much faster.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you. So we've talked a lot about the human skills that are necessary and that will be even more important when we're on this way of implementing AI in organizations. If we maybe look at what our leaders or the people who are running the companies need to be focusing on, maybe I start with you, Benedetto. What is it what they need to focus on, and how do leaders build alignment when teams don't share the same idea of what AI can do, or what are some practical thoughts you have on what leaders should be looking into?
Yeah, it's a great question, Sandra, and actually these questions also enables me to answer ones we have in the chat by the basis. And it's a which has a lot of votes. I will read the question as well, and then I will answer yours and the basis question at the same time. So the question of the basis is how can we say that we can build a strategy or operating model using AI? Then it will be copying someone else's idea. And are we talking about leveraging generative AI or agentic AI? It's a super beautiful question. Why? Because it links to another misconception of AI that in the way LLM have been trained using public information, they basically tell you what someone else has said. Well, in a way that might happen, but that's not the real value of using AI, right? So What does that mean? It means that one of the key requirements for me in an organization to start with is really to deploy a very well-crafted training program for AI. Because through this training program, you can really put everybody on the same page on what AI can do or can't do. And therefore, if I now connect to the question that is so well crafted, it's been Ville himself that has been teaching me super powerful use cases on how to use LLM for innovation processes. And it's absolutely groundbreaking how this exercise teaches you really to understand and amplify the power of, in that case, was generative AI to boost innovation processes. And that completely redefines this misconception, which if I use an LLM, I'm basically just recycling what someone else has said. Exploring more, really AI has so many components. We have the generative part, we have the agentic part, but let's not forget the machine learning, the deep learning. And knowing which of these elements of AI you need to use for what is extremely important. And that's what, a thorough training program in the organization helps you to do. When I was at Diageo, which was my last executive job, I realized that until I put a critical mass of my people or my organization of digital and technology through the training program, we just were not speaking the same languages, the same language, and many people had objection to, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that, simply because of perception of what the technology can do. So extremely important, speak the same language, do foundational training program and understand which component of AI can be used to solve which business problem.
Mm.
Thank you, Benedetto. Ville, you want to continue with a couple of examples of how leaders can help teams to learn to collaborate with AI or
Yes, let me add a few. I mean, Benedetto summarized it extremely well. One thing that has come up as well, often when we talk to companies who have been very good at sort of adoption, often what you see is the importance of the leadership, really sponsoring it, being excited about it. And I was talking to, I think it was the CTO of a Paris-based company called Alain that does healthcare insurance, and they have healthcare products as well. And we've been slowly writing a case study with them, and they're very vocal about how they're using generative AI. It's really smeared all over their company. And we actually asked him this question, like, how have you managed to get to this point? And his answer revolved very much around that. He said that, look, our leadership are not just there to throw fancy words around. And, it's not like they came to some executive education program at INSEAD and came back with all these buzzwords. No, they're so walking the talk, right? As he directly quoting him, they're keeping it real, right? So they're also showing by example how they're using it to inspire others to use it, right? So that's something that has come up as well. Now, how do you get people started, right? You need to give them the tools, right? And then encourage them to start playing around with it, right? And often at the sort of different levels at which you could use generative AI, right? Obviously, you have, I sometimes talk about this sort of four pillar way that you could view yourself as a user of generative AI, right? So at the bottom level, you have what I call the avoider. This is the person who's skeptical, scared, decides it's better to just have nothing to do with it. Obviously, this is not great. The next level up, you have the extremely enthusiastic outsourcer who thinks this is magic and they're using it for everything without any question. Okay, that's not good either, right? You need to be skeptical, right? You need to, think a little bit of what it says. The next level up then is the person who is skeptical, but they still use the whole tool as sort of one directional. It's like you kind of like push things into it, you get an answer back, you're a little bit skeptical, that's it. What you're missing from there is this kind of a collaborative workflow where you allow the AI to start criticizing you, and then you revise and you criticize the AI. Like you work together as a team, right? That's where you want to get. Now, how do you get there? Is exactly what Benedetto was saying. Education is very important, right? Now, let me just say a few concrete examples here, just in case our audience wants to give it a go. I mean, when you think about this kind of workflows, going back a little bit to my answer about forecasting, the hybrid, first thing you need to think a little bit about are what are the strengths, what are the complementary skills that you bring into the table and the AI can bring to the table, right? And if that sort of set is bigger than each one of its parts, then you have a hope that this collaboration will lead to some kind of a net positive effect. So as an example, when I write, for instance, when I'm not teaching, I'm doing research, a big chunk of that is writing all the time, right? When I think about writing, where do my strengths lie? Well, I think humans are very good at thinking about arguments, right? What kind of examples resonate with the audience and the overall structure of the piece that needs to be put together, right? I haven't personally found AI to be very good at keeping sort of longer pieces of text sort of coherently in its whatever mind it has, right? But where is AI extremely good? AI is so good at knitting the arguments I give it to together into beautiful prose that flows really well. So how do I now work with AI to write? I give very quick and dirty bullet points. It writes it into an article for me. I read it, I criticize it, it edits. We go back and forth, right? Until we converge to something that I'm happy about. And then I may hand it over to AI to say, well, now it's your turn to criticize my piece, right? And then we converge to something. Now, when you think about it like this, I don't need to spend time anymore on the nitty-gritty of writing details, making things connect and making pretty, right? Instead, I can think about the core arguments, which is the fun part of writing, right? And instead of writing mechanically, now what is actually a more important skill is obviously to know how to use AI, but also to read, because I need to read probably 20 different versions that the AI produces, right? And then give it feedback to revise the next version, right? But I think thinking about the workflows in this fashion, right? What do I bring to the table? What can AI bring to the table? And then going from there to these kind of iterative workflows, right, is the way to go. That's really how you see yourself augmenting to a different level, in my experience.
Thank you, Ville. And unfortunately, there's so many questions and so little time left. I did want to pick out a question that I think then in the end goes back to human capabilities, but there is an anonymous question which got a bit upvoted. How will real value differentiator be created with AI if all companies have actually access to the same AI? So I don't know, Benjamin, maybe you want to start on it and then you want to also chip in, Benedetto.
The question is, how do you differentiate decision if everybody has the same LLM?
Yes, if Eric,
Yeah,
and I think there we go back to the human capabilities that we've been discussing previously.
maybe. Yeah, definitely. I think the talent, the skills argument is a huge part of the answer, and was very neatly described, I think, in the previous parts. I'll quote some of our own studies with Global 2000 corporates. The AI leaders, the firms within a comparable set, so firms within an industry, within maybe a similar region, etc. But we've done multivariate analysis to understand really the enabling factors of success with AI and differentiated performance. There is definitely, again, a big component around humans, talent, reskilling, and this was well, I think, developed in the various part of this conversation. There is also a huge part that has to do with architecture, right? Preparing your organization to feed the systems in the right ways, what will also help it differentiate in terms of performance. This is hard job. This is much harder than the replatforming type of jobs that you had to do when you moved from on-premise to the cloud. It is typically a job also that is complicated by security aspects as you bring all these agents to improve workflows in a large enterprise that you'll have AI agents in HR, AI agents in finance, AI agents for the front office, maybe, et cetera, et cetera. You have hundreds of agents. How do you ensure consistent security across the enterprise? There are a number, I think, of complex data-related questions to power and differentiate your enterprise performance when it comes to AI. And those architectural components, I think, are not about human capabilities necessarily. They aren't about culture. They are about the non-fancy stuff like compliance policies, identity and access management policy revisions, and many other grunt IT stuff that may have been living in an organization for over 20 years. This exposure, I think, early on of the technology in the overall AI strategy, of the data technology in the overall AI strategy, is a fundamental part of the differentiated performance.
Thank you, Benjamin. So companies who have missed the digital transformation, they really have a lot to do now. Benedetto, or maybe I can hand over to you, Ville, and then Benedetto,
Sure.
you can comment on, because you wanted to also chip in this question, and then maybe Ville, you can slowly wrap up because it's time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll be very quick to answer this question. What is the differentiator? Well, for me, it's like saying that if I give you a Ferrari, you can be as fast as Lewis Hamilton in a race. Of course not. So the real differentiator is how we understand how the technology works and how we can use it to solve business problem. That's it. So the real differentiator is the human factor in using the technology.
Perfect. Okay, I think I can see that we have a whole 1 minute left here. So unfortunately, the time is coming to an end. First of all, thank you all. Thank you all for coming. And a huge thank you, Benedetto and Benjamin, for all these remarkably grounded and insightful comments that you've been making. Let me just summarize here briefly. I took some notes along the way. I want to make quickly 3 points here. So the first point is that AI doesn't fail because of the technology. Well, necessarily doesn't fail because of the technology. It fails because we have a lot of ambiguity in our organizational systems, right? We saw a lot of examples, and I would say one theme today was clear. Pilots, they succeed in these sort of lab artificial conditions, but scaling requires confronting this kind of a messy reality with a lot of messy data, workflows, governance, decision rights, and so forth, right? AI is really not this kind of plug and play. It's almost more redesign and integrate, I would call it. So that's the first point. Second point I want to make is that AI is forcing the leaders to really clarify how work really gets done, right? Not in the sort of org charts, but the real workflow that happens in these kind of shadow Slack channels, legacy systems, all the kind of tacit knowledge we have, and many of the other informal influence networks, right? Now, once the organizations start to map how decisions are actually made, we see adoption jumping, resistance dropping, and suddenly the transparency becomes a real strategic asset for you. Now, lastly, what I want to say is the human capabilities matter more, not less. We heard about courage, we heard about system thinking, we heard about judgment under uncertainty, and their ability to really articulate clear narratives in our complex environments. Now, as I said earlier, I think one key piece for human is in governance, right? Defining their objective function, what constraints and the values our AI system must bring to the system, right? Now, keep in mind, machines optimize, humans choose, okay? Now, with all of that saying, one sentence summary of all of this, perhaps I would say something on the lines of AI transforms organizations not by automating tasks, but by demanding clarity, okay? Clarity in the data, clarity in workflow, and clarity in purpose, okay? On that note, Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you again to our panelists. And thanks to Sandra and the INSEAD team for hosting the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye and Merry Christmas, everyone.
Bye-bye.